Hey, hello, it's Mooch. Welcome to Minding Your mAhs. Today we're going to take a look at Xtar's new concept chargers and the cells that they use. The CH2, please excuse the tape, that's from the teardown, and the VH4. Now, originally these were all scheduled for sale this month, but after receiving some concerns in some feedback they got from the community, they stopped the release and they said, okay, we're just going to call them concept chargers. We'll get some community feedback and we'll improve them. Now, I have mixed feelings about that. It's fantastic that they stopped the release. A lot of companies would just go ahead and say, no, sell them as is, let's get our money back. Xtar said, no, you've brought up some fair concerns. We're going to hold off and get your feedback and make the changes. I'm sure that cost them a lot of money. But I'm frustrated that it ever got this far. The custom wraps for these cells, the chargers themselves, the instructions, the retail packaging. I would have loved it if they just came to the community and said, hey, we have an idea. They don't have to ask everybody, just ask a few people. You can have non-disclosures, and they would never had to go through this. But that's just because I think these are very innovative chargers, even though there's some issues. And I like to see companies succeed when they come up with something innovative. Basic specs for the chargers, they fit 18650s inside these adapters. If you take out the adapters, then you can fit 2700 and 21700. Now, the only thing is they only have these two cells and another 18650, but only these two sizes, 21700 and 18650 for these units. But it gives them flexibility, of course, to use 2700 if you can fit 21700 in there. The VH4 is 2 cells at 1 amp, 1 cell at 2 amps, or 4 cells at half an amp. Basically, it's a 2 amp charger, and it'll just divide it up. The CH2, you get 1 amp from 1 cell or 1 amp and 2 cells. It does not do 2 amps if you only have a single cell. Now the VH4, the V was for visible, because this has an LCD display, which we'll see. And H they liked just because it was a kind of a vertically oriented structural element. So they threw the H in there just because this is a vertical charger. The CH2, the C was for cost effective, and the H again just for a structural element. Both have USB-C connectors. Here, please excuse the tape. Now, the way these chargers work with these cells that have the exposed contact, just one on this, is you would push down into, now you see that they haven't turned colors, and what I do is I end up rotating until I see the color change, indicating, hey, I'm starting the charge. And same thing you can do for this charger. Has the LCD display, and put the cells down in. If it makes contact, you'll see, and it'll start the charging. Now this one, these early prototypes, I believe, because these other ones don't have the fully exposed band, any way I put it in makes contact. Now, something that gets interesting here is these, with the extra wrap over the band, don't fit into the adapters. So you have to put them down in. No LCD display yet. I have to rotate. There we go. I'll deal with, or I'll address some of this, but this leaves it, capable of bouncing around. It's just not a great solution. I'm surprised that this was set up for a retail sale. Now, the cells themselves, there's one that's a MOLYcell P42A rewrap, and there's the single contact, and then the MOLYcell P26A, and you can see the single contact. I don't think these are going to be part of what they sell. I think they'll end up putting another wrap over it. And what I did is I started breaking them down. And if you take off the outer wrap, what you're left with then is what you see here. There's a cell with an extra spot welded band, and you can see the spot welds there, and another one on the other side. And then the same for the 18650, a band on top. And if I remove the band, here are the bands, and they'll be spot welded. So I just tore those off, and you're left with, now I took off the rest of the wrap also, but there's a spot weld point, and you can see the cutout here looks done by hand, because I think these are just samples set out. But here you would have a wrap with a hole cut in it. Namely, the wrap would be on it with the hole cut in it. They would add the band, and then they'd put another wrap over it, and then you get this. Now, why do all that? Why add this band? Well, the thing is, if you have just a hole in the wrap, or at least what their thinking was, is because these are nickel-plated steel cans, if you just have a hole in the wrap, every time you're putting it down in and out of the charger, there could be a little bit of abrasion on that. And eventually the nickel plating could be taken off because these are stainless steel contacts in the chargers. What that can do is lead these cans susceptible to rusting, because then you just have the raw steel. So the engineers at Xtar said, hey, we'll set it up where we have the first wrap, we'll have holes in it. Where is that one? We'll have holes in the first wrap. Just pretend there's wrap in the rest of the cell. We'll put the band on, and then we'll wrap over that. And that'll limit the exposure for the metal band, and also now any abrasion, and you can see the abrasion lines here, and that was with hundreds of rotating back and forth, engaging and disengaging inside here, and there's just almost no actual abrasion on the stainless steel itself, just slight little marks. Now, this is a great concept to prevent rusting and abrasion of the can itself. Problem is, it leads these cells very large because of this metal band and the second wrap. The 21700 is now about 21.6 millimeters in diameter. The 18650 is now about 18.7 millimeter. And the moly cells are already a little bit larger than a lot of cells. So once you use moly cells and add the band and a second wrap, these get big, and that's going to cause problems in a lot of devices, from flashlights to vaping devices to all kinds of other things. You've got to take that into account. And the biggest problem is it's going to cause more abrasion. I mean, if it's already a tight fit, putting these in and out of something is going to make it even tighter, which could lead to wear and exposing of the ring. And that brings up the safety issues. This exposed side contact, and this is one of my two big concerns. One is proprietary batteries. The chargers are brilliant, innovative. There hasn't been something like this big a jump in charger design in a long time. But in having this exposed side contact, if you have a mechanical vaping device, a mechanical mod or a mech mod, and it doesn't have a liner, and this side contact touches the side contact of the mechanical mod inside, you can either have an auto-firing situation if the positive's up, or if the positive's down, you can short circuit the battery when you press the button. That's bad. There can be a fire, an explosion. It's just really bad. And that might be an issue in flashlights. I don't know if the side contact, if the negative contact touches the inside of the flashlight. Is that a problem for some flashlights? This is also a problem if you have series connected regulated vaping devices, and typically you'd see it, one battery was up, one battery was down. If these two metal cans touch each other, if they're connected in series, and in most regulated devices, regulated vaping devices with more than one battery, they are connected in series. If the two cans touch, one of the cells gets short circuited and can catch fire or explode. Now, most of them are set up where one is like this and one is like this. So the odds of these two bare spots touching are low, but there are some that are wired like this. And also, if one of these is worn out up here and the other one has a bare spot, they can touch. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it just means you're just increasing the risks that something bad could happen. I feel strongly that if these are ever released, safety, particularly for those two circumstances, but overall, has to be a huge part of Xtar's marketing, of the manual, the website, just top to bottom. It's just not mentioned in the slightest in their initial releases. It's not mentioned in the instructions for either device. Nothing about that. They always say, hey, don't short circuit the battery, all that standard safety stuff you have to put in to sell in the European Union, but nothing for specific circumstances which make this such a big issue. Now, the other issue that I had is, well, and I brought up before, 21700s fit great in here. This one I got in just fine. It goes red. Going to rotate, and this one goes red. So now they're charging. Problem is, if you've got, as I mentioned before, these 18650s don't fit the adapters. And I was trying to get one all the way through, and I was just afraid that it'd be really, really hard to remove. So these were going to go for sale when they couldn't even get through here. Now, maybe you could flatten out this band if you try a lot and keep working at it, and you can get the band completely flattened against the cell, a couple thousandths of an inch more. Then you can start putting them in out. But I thought that was a problem, and this was a product and cells not quite ready for prime time. Removing the outer wrap to make the cell smaller and leaving it like this, I don't recommend at all. Yes, now it fits down inside. It's just the wrap that's making the difference for these adapters. But now you've got this exposed band, and that's the same thing as having a damaged wrap. And that's just not acceptable for use in a vaping device, and maybe in a flashlight too. Okay, there's a couple concerns, but here's some just basic using it. We'll take this out. What I don't do, and I'll go into this one. What I don't do is waste my time. Well, I thought, it's just me the way I'm wired, trying to line this up. And I'd love to see a white spot right here for those who do want to align a white spot here. So I say, okay, there's the circle. I just drop it in wherever and rotate until, and you can feel it click into place. Not click into place, but go into place. And until I see the display come on, and I know, okay, the cell is charging. Now, something that would surprise me is, I was thinking this thing would be a disaster for stability, and it's actually fairly stable. Now, if you've got a cat that insists on knocking everything over, okay, that could be an issue. But so far, right now, I haven't had any problems with that. Yes, it's easy to knock over if you swipe it with a hand or something, but otherwise, I was surprised at how stable it was. Charging on both units was perfectly acceptable, 4.18 volts to 4.22 volts. I'm not worried about that. That's something that can always be adjusted in firmware once they did it. Now, if you've got 4 cells lined up in here, and let's take this out, and this one will just, now I have charged these cells. I should take one with fully wrapped. I have done these in the 2700 slot, but it takes a little bit of rotating around. Of course, now that I'm doing the video, I'm going to have problems with this. There we go. So it can't be done without the adapters. What's nice is 4 by half an amp, if I start taking them out, it still stays at half an amp, which I like, because what I don't want is say, okay, I'm charging these at half an amp, and these 3 are charged, I'm going to pull them out, and I'm left with 1 cell still inside. I don't want that to switch to 2 amps. It divides as you put down. 1 cell at 2 amps. If I put in another one, they're at 1 amp each. If I put in the 3rd and 4th cell, then they're at half amp each. That's okay, but I don't want it rising back up if only 1 cell was left. That, for me, would be an unacceptable surprise. Now, something that I didn't like, you can see here, see how the display is being cut off? This is a typical viewing angle for this charger, and now you can start to see that there's some printing down there. Lithium-ion, it says on the bottom, and the rest of the display, but you can't see it from a normal angle. And if you walk up closer and to stand right over the charger, everything kind of disappears. This is an LCD display set up for what's called 6 o'clock viewing, viewing from the angle up from the bottom. If you stand right over the charger, the display disappears. So I'd like to see this bezel pulled back, or a different LCD and it's tipped up or something where we can actually see this from this angle, maybe 45-degree angle or something like that. Now you can also see once this contact goes display goes dim, there's no button. There's nothing to get the display visible again. Even from this angle, it's hard to view. And then from up above, it's just invisible. You've got to pull a battery out and put a battery back in order to make the display bright again. So it'd be great to have that switched. Now, the one thing I was thinking about in terms of for long-term use, and if I can find the cell, here we go. You can start to see the wrap gets a little bit abraded. This was about 200 insertion and removables. Now, that's not bad for 200, but we're going to need new wraps. And we're going to need to realize that it's a custom wrap, and it's going to wear out over time. So we need a way to either have instructions for punching these holes, or separate wraps need to be added with the charger or something like that. And that's their new CH2 and VH4 chargers and their cells. Okay, overall, cons, proprietary cells. Having cells with this band here, with the custom punched wraps and all, being the only cells you can use with these chargers, that makes it a very limited market. Now, maybe you can say, hey, if I don't mind punching out my wraps, and I don't mind maybe abrading off the nickel plating, I can use standard cells. They would actually fit in the adapters then, but that's a decision we shouldn't have to make. The exposed side contact, that's a con. That's a huge safety issue for a couple of different setups, like the innovation, but not at the expense of safety. The large diameter is a con for me. It already takes a large cell and makes it even larger by having this second wrap and the metal band up on top here. Having this display cut off at the bottom, that's a con. No way to undim it, that's a con. You have to pull the cell out and put back in. We need a place to store the adapters. If you've got 21700s, then you've got these adapters flying around, and they're going to get lost. And if you want to charge 18650s, you're stuck. If you lose those, well, you can have them flopping around in here, but that's not a great solution. And also, something that happens with cells here, okay, in the display, I don't know if you can see here, milliampere hour and milliamp. It alternates between displaying milliampere hour and milliamp. Well, the thing is, it's random. Depending on the timing you put them in, it'll show you milliamp or milliamp hour. Now, those letters are tiny. They're very similar. One is just slightly longer than the other. And it's very confusing whether it's displaying milliamp or milliamp hour to me. I would like to see, when you put a cell in, that they're all displaying milliamp or they're all displaying milliampere hour at the same time, not randomly depending what's going on. That way I know, okay, if I see one displaying milliamp, I can look at the others and they'll just match the display. But that's just a small software change. All right, pros. Incredibly innovative. A vertical charger, tiny, cell here. Just the concept of having the side contact and having vertical charging, I love it. I wish more charger manufacturers would go just so completely out of the box and come up with something new and refreshing like this. It's led to issues, but it is incredibly innovative, and I love that. The small size, the bright, beautiful display on the charger, I like. That's a pro. I think the charging rate, 2 amps for their cells, that's perfect. If you have 4 cells, that's half an amp. For this one, it's 1 amp and 1 amp. So that's perfect for these cells. It doesn't tip over easily. Even the CH2, that's a pro. They run cool, which surprised me because so many chargers run so hot. It uses a Type-C connector. Now, that needs to be a good quality connector, but that's good. There's some new products coming out now that are still using micro USB, and that's just unacceptable now for me. It's a pro that it fits 18650, 2700. There are no cells from Xtar for that yet. Not set up for this charger. I'm sure they will, though. And 21700. So that's fantastic also. But Xtar sent me these things to get my feedback, and they're going to be sending them to other people too. So for the changes, well, other than not having an exposed size contact and proprietary batteries, I'd love to have the display tilted up or some way to be able to see the bottom of the display, just sliding it up here or pulling down the bezel or something. I'd like to have a white dot here at the top, so when we put in the cell and we see the mark there, it's just a little white dot there up on top. Silkscreened on to check the alignment, so when we drop it in, it goes right to being charging, and we don't have to do any rotating around. I would like to have the 18650 adapters, the inner diameter enlarged, so their 18650s can fit in, because that's not going any further than that. I'd like to make sure this is a good USB-C connector, one that's going to last a long time, not have some piece of junk, put an extra nickel into this. I'd love to see a place to store the adapters. Where do we put these? I don't want to have another place for them. Now, it's going to make this thing bigger, but I'm hoping they come up with something clever for that. I'd love to see a button added to the unit to wake up the unit, or some way, even a, it doesn't need an actual button, but a touch sensor or something, so when I put my finger down, made it look like I dimmed the display, but when I put my finger down or press a button, the display undims, because right now it's just useless. It's too, I want to be able to check this from across the room. I'd love to see the LEDs on this one also, but in the front, and for this one in the front, because I would like to have these LEDs visible from across the room. I don't want to have to walk over here to check the status of the LEDs. Just move them to the front. That way, from anywhere in the room I can see those two LEDs aren't going to keep me up at night, and you can always auto dim the LEDs after a certain amount of time if you want to. For the VH4, I'd like to see LEDs added to the front so I don't have to walk over here to read the display. I'd like to have the milliamp hour display on this. All cells show milliamp, then all cells show milliamp per hour at the same time, and not have what it shows or how it goes back and forth between the two values, not have that happen based solely on timing of when you put the cells in. And I think that might be a workaround. Yes, okay, so now you can see milliamp for both, milliamp hour for both. Well, you put all the cells in, then you plug it in, but very few companies say, oh yeah, that's totally okay. Put the cells in when the unit's not powered up. So I don't recommend it, but that is a workaround now, because all the cells will be in place, so they'll all fire up at the same time. And last, and I don't know if this is even remotely reasonable, because it's going to make it a big and clumsy, an adapter of some kind, so we can use standard cells in here. You've got the center pin down at the bottom that touches the positive contact of the battery. Well, if we put a standard battery in, we need this. So is there something that could come out the back, and like a cap, a magnetic cap, or just a small magnetic contact, a retractable cord that comes up to the top so we can use a standard battery? But that means you've got the cord, you've got the connector, and unless it all retracts down inside a unit that sits up another half-inch higher, it's just a big, clumsy kind of workaround, and I don't know if that's reasonable to have all that expense and everything just to try to keep this vertical format and use it with batteries. But I want to give them all my ideas for kind of changes that can happen. And those are my thoughts on the concept chargers. It's innovative as all heck, but it does have safety issues. And I'd like to ask, what do you think? What do you like? What do you not like? Would you buy this? I mean, should it become a product as is? If not, would you buy it if they make certain changes? And what would those changes what would you like those changes to be? You can leave that down in the comments below. I'd love to see what you think. That's all for today. Thank you for watching.